Today we're going to be talking about The Matrix, Part 1, Part 2. Why? Big question. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. You know, I just gave him a watch the other day, and a few pretty interesting things struck me that either I had thought of before or had not. Regardless, I think there's some pretty heavy philosophy in these movies, and there's a particular line of thinking that the Wachowski brothers, who wrote and directed the Matrix trilogy, really drilled home very well, but I think went over a lot of people's heads. It's really about free will versus determinism in a lot of ways. It asks some other questions, like what does it mean to be human, which is the study of anthropology and other things, but the debate between free will versus determinism is prevalent throughout the Matrix. Early on in the movie, Morpheus asks Neo, "Do you believe in fate, Neo?" And Neo says no, and Morpheus asks why not. Neo says, "I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my own life." Later in the movie, when Neo goes to see the Oracle says, "Don't worry about that vase," and he turns and says, "What vase?" And then the vase breaks. And then the Oracle says something very interesting. She says, "Would you have broken that vase if I didn't say anything?" And Neo's kind of confused about that. Later on in the sequel, the Oracle again has a conversation with Neo, where Neo clearly knows that the Oracle knows what Neo's going to do before he does it. Neo says, "Do you know if I'm going to take the candy?" "Well, how can I make a choice if you already know?" And the Oracle says, "You didn't come here to make the choice, you came here to understand why you made it." And that's an interesting thing. Later in the movie, Neo meets the architect, who is the program who wrote The Matrix. And the architect reveals some very interesting things concerning The Matrix and the free will versus determinism argument. According to evolution theory, determinism would be true, because we would be nothing more than physical beings who are going through physical actions and reactions based on the laws of physics. Which means, if you were smart enough and knew all the variables, you could actually predict absolutely everything a person will think and do based on a mathematical equation. And that's what the architect tried to do. He says that the first Matrix that he created was perfect, sublime. He knew, because it says, and if you watch some of the peripheral Matrix videos, there's a thing where you see the machines in the Animatrix. There's this one segment from it where the machines are probing the human mind, trying to understand it, and apparently they did come to understand it. So they made a Matrix where they knew absolutely every interaction that every human being would make to make a perfect system that worked together. And the architect said this: despite all of this, with mathematical precision, there was still an anomaly in the Matrix. Basically, people making choices that could not be predicted, which led to a system crash and an anomaly, which was the one, who would then restart the Matrix every time this anomaly came, because with everything predicted and every variable understood, that means there was a path that every person in the Matrix would take, necessarily. And it would all be predicted. So if one person went astray, then everything would start breaking down. And that's why in The Matrix Reloaded and in Revolutions, which we're not really going to talk about, things start breaking down in the Matrix. You start seeing glitches in the Matrix. You start seeing sinks coming out of the floors. If you look closely, there's all these, and the Wachowski brothers did this on purpose. The Matrix starts falling apart, and that's why it needs to be rebooted. And this has a lot to do with the biblical view of creation, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But back to the architect. Isn't this getting interesting? So the architect said that then, because of this anomaly, which happened every time, the anomaly became something that could be predicted and then controlled, which is why the path that Neo takes, though originally it was a systemic anomaly, it had become, though an anomaly still, something unpredictable, it became predictable by the fact that it kept happening. Apparently the Matrix would be rebooted, a new crop would be brought in, and the whole process would go again, and there'd be another one. The movie the trilogy, the three movies, this Neo, though there were Neos before him, and the Merovingian says, "I survived your predecessors." This one was the unique one, and the reason he was unique is because the Oracle was a intuitive program who, having realized that human beings are not, she says to Neo, "You've made a believer out of me." This is really cool. She recognized that human choice is not based on determinism. There's something else. Basically, the movie never comes out and says it, but it is actually a wonderful proof of the human soul, or at least within the Matrix reality, it would be considered proof of the human soul. Neo, in many ways, is a picture of Christ. He is fully man, but he's also fully something else. In the context of the Matrix, he's also a program, and you can find hints throughout that in the Matrix.
I'm straight. He's a machine.
Neo was given a cookie by the Oracle. That's why he went to go see her. And later in the second movie, the Merovingian talks about how he created a piece of cake that was a program to make people do things. He gives it to a woman, and the woman has a reaction that he indeed wrote within the program, because the programs in the Matrix, they understand the mathematical equations and variables that go into human thought. So he curved her reality to this and into this piece of pie. Anyways, so the one program, which originally was a systemic anomaly, was now a predictable and controllable function within the Matrix. That was given to Neo by the Oracle when he took the cookie in the first movie. When he died at the end of the first movie, he died and he was resurrected. I think that's kind of meant to be a picture of Christ. And Christ is the incarnation. He's fully man, but he's also fully divine. Within the Matrix, he is fully man and he's also a computer program. And some people say, well, how can that be possible? Well, Agent Smith proves this to be possible in the next movie, because he's a program who then becomes human. Bane, that's in Revolutions. So, I'm trying to organize my thought. This is cool stuff, though. So, what's really my favorite scene in the whole Matrix trilogy is the scene with the architect, where Neo is coming to realize all this. He never comes out and says it, but he says in a moment, the problem is choice. The problem is choice, and the architect indeed agrees. The question is, does the architect know what Neo is going to do? I don't think he does, because there's this part where the architect says, that's interesting. You said something, or you came to that conclusion quicker than the other ones. It's showing that human beings, though there are deterministic things about us, like if you prick my finger with a pin, yes, it will hurt. You can indeed predict that. That is determined. But there's something else that makes us undetermined. The Matrix as a whole, what is it really about? It's all about, the Matrix is a prison for your mind. And I think the point of the Matrix is that if determinism is true, we are a slave. And, Agent Smith, he says this before the Burly Brawl. He says, it was purpose that created us, purpose that drives us and that binds us. We cannot escape purpose. And he says, we're not here because we're free. We're here because we're not free. There's no escaping reason. There's no escaping purpose. Agent Smith is kind of, he basically exemplifies, or personifies the determinism point of view. And within the context of the movie, I think he absolutely does. I believe everything Smith does was predicted and coded by the Matrix in order to, and we'll get to that right before we end the video, whereas Neo exemplifies pure free will, and that's why he's so free to do whatever he wants in the Matrix. So it really is, as I said, the Matrix is really a battle between free will versus determinism, and the movie ends on a brilliant note where the two come together. And let's bring this back to God. And this is to do with the Arminianism versus Calvinism viewpoint. If God knows the future, how can we be free? Here's my understanding of it. It is literally both at the same time. It's quite an amazing thing. Basically, God knows everything. He knows what we're going to do before we do it, because he exists outside of the timeline, so he can see the whole thing. However, the choices we make within the timeline are not determined by God, but we have a soul. And as best as I can understand what a soul is, it is a thinking thing that is independent from God, which makes its own decisions not based on something determined in the past, but rather in of itself, which is pretty amazing. So you have both free will and determinism because God knows what we're going to do, and so he constructed reality in such a way that knowing what we would do, he has made it so reality moves in a specific direction, and at the same time he can come into the reality to make sure that it happens the way he wants to. So we are free to choose. God knows our choices, and he uses it to build eternity, and that's what the Bible says. Anyway, so I just thought a really interesting discussion. This is going to open up a whole bunch of comments and thoughts, so I hope you enjoyed that. Take care, guys.